living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep. The poor and the underclass are growing. Racial justice and human rights are non-existent. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain. That is their primary method of survival. Keep us asleep, keep us selfish, keep us sedated.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Here's your host, Michael Storm.
It is always so exciting just before turning on the microphone, and I hear the music, I hear the liner, the bumping, and I know I'm connected to the network, and the music starts to play, and the little bit of production that I did there starts to make its announcement known, and that Metallica beat just builds up, and it's just amazing just in those few moments before you turn on the microphone, and the myriad of thoughts and things that are going through your mind. Oh, what am I going to say? How am I going to do this? What where do we go? What's it all for? All that stuff. The second you press that button, it better be gone for the most part. You better be ready to dive right in and do the thing. And I always am. It's such a pleasure to come here each week and do this. It's, they tell you writing in a journal is a good thing to do. There are a number of reasons for it. One is it helps you remember things, but there's just the exercise of writing. There's everything that goes into it. It's a benefit for you. Well, I keep a little journal, as it were, my little notes and things that I jot in. It is a journal, and try to share with you over the course of the show. But the show itself, it serves that same purpose. My wife and I are talking about diet changes and things. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on in our lives right now. We're about ready to move, and just a whole bunch of things are changing. And we're talking about diet, and kids are moving out, and other kids are growing up, and everything is just a new conversation. And it's not like we haven't had the diet conversation before. It's not like we need to do a little bit better about some of the things that we eat, and need to eat a little less of that, if not completely cut that out. Just have those same conversations that we all want to have. And my wife is a worry eater. A lot of people are. They literally stuff their problems down their throat. It's just I don't feel good for whatever reason, but this piece of cake makes me feel real good. And she's looking for a way to find something else to put that energy into, write it at that moment. And one of the things that we were talking about was the benefits of keeping a journal and journaling thoughts. And my first thought is that I've been doing it for years. I have my own sort of weekly journal, and it helps. It really does help me to think about these things and put a lot of the stuff that I talk about in perspective, as well as getting this opportunity to talk to different people and find out about new and interesting ideas, because I might not otherwise purposely do that. Why would I? Most people don't. They're not necessary. They do about their thing. If they're into a thing, if it's cars or sports or comic books or whatever it is, they can give you information and examples and just fanboydom, ad nauseum. It would never stop. But to take a little bit of time to really expand your mind, so that you're finding all these different things and looking at all of these different points of view from around the world, and it's fun and interesting. It can be tough to do. And then being able to take and communicate that idea to somebody. I have the luxury of having this longer form where I can do that. I can expound on the things, and I can sort of fumble if I have to, feel my way around a topic in a conversation, and try to pinch and poke at it from all different sides, and get the best view of it. Not everybody has that, and it's becoming tougher to do, harder to do every single day. Communicate complicated ideas to people. We're having to do, not only is it harder to do that in general and in and of itself, but the tools that we use to communicate the most now are limiting, and they also exist in other people's sandboxes. You know what I'm saying there? These thoughts and ideas that a lot of us are expressing are being expressed on other people's platforms. So it's great when things like TLB Talk and my friends at Float and people like that get together with their friends and people that think the same way and that are tech smart and create their own platforms. I've even done a sort of minor version of that myself with the Toward Anarchy website. So while we're at that, let's take care of some business a little bit, because things are changing at the network. Of course, everyone knows by now about John and his passing, and what he was to the network and what he was to the listeners and the people that really formed around and supported this network. And with all of those changes, things will, they'll experience some ups and downs, and there'll be things that some people will like and some people won't. And I'm excited for it. I'm looking forward to what I'm always excited about the change. Change is always hard, but I want to try to embrace it in the best way that I can. I want to think positively about it. Again, that idea of thinking positively about what we're doing all the time, it comes to mind, and it doesn't come to mind enough, I think, day to day. Something else that we lack, something along the same lines as this ability to communicate. It's becoming tougher, and that's what we'll talk about today. If you go to towardanarchy.com, I'm going to do that myself right now. I was refreshing my browser just to make sure everything was moving quickly. It seemed like I was trying to post a couple of things running up to the beginning of the show, spread out and on social media, say, hey, it's time for the show, guys. And everything seemed a little slow, so I closed all the windows and started all over again. So I had to enter it too, towardanarchy.com. And if you are with me live, November 14th is where we're at, hopefully. I think that's where I started my day, and I don't recall, but then would I, if I slipped into any dimensional portals or anything like that? I go through some weird passageways sometimes. It's just November 14th, and if you can't find it, if it's not right there on the front page, click the episodes button and either click on 2021 there and go by month, or you can click search and you can search by different topics and names of guests. And as far as today goes, you could try the word communication or communicate, because that's what's on my thought process all week. It's just right there at the back of my mind, just hanging out, and it really always is. And we've had this conversation before, but I think that we have to have it again, because it's not working. You're not listening. Otherwise, we would be winning this thing. We already have the logic and the reason and the facts, the numbers on our side. So the thing that must be missing is our ability to communicate and display these things in a proper manner. And if we're living our lives, not hiding our light under a bush, then we should be shining as individuals in the ideals that we hold within ourselves, whether they be republicanism, voluntarism, anarchy, libertarianism. Those are the leaning, the direction people lean around here, certainly. it doesn't matter a great deal the difference in those ideas, especially if you can't communicate them. So that's what this whole thing has been about all along. I saw this opportunity to communicate with people, and it was a long time ago. I'm not even talking about this show. It's just my ability to my willingness to. It's not even an ability. Everybody can speak, and most people speak fairly well individually, one-on-one, but then the audience grows and they start to feel judged, and they start to take too much personal position in the mass communication process. I guess I don't know. I guess I never really understood it because it doesn't happen to me. I never saw the difference between talking to one person necessarily. Not in the sense that we have to talk about today. I'll try to give you some tips and some ideas, and this isn't just pulled out of the pages of a book. This is my real working thoughts and ideas behind the ability to communicate and why we do so and what makes good communication. And I never saw the difference in the importance, the core importance, as soon as they were shown to me or generally understood through my development and my aging, that there's any difference between communicating with one person or a million people. You're still talking. The first thing that made sense to me is that I was always just talking to sort of one person. And they tell you to try to visualize. That's one of the tricks that they use. Try to visualize just one person that you're talking to. My brain doesn't work that way. There's a million faces and ideas and things that float past my mind every second, even as I'm speaking, and can lead to me just sort of falling off and trailing off. It's a big part of why I'm lucky to have the larger audience and time to talk to it like this. There's so many different aspects of it that we can work on. If you go to towardanarchy.com, you can follow along with that idea. And I as always, I pulled some links up there, and we'll talk about some of these links. I want you to subscribe to the email, and I want you to stop subscribing me to email lists that I didn't sign up for. You know who you are. Or at least sign up for mine too. It's amazing how many email lists I'm on. Right wing, mostly Trump supporting, QAnon. I certainly did not sign up for these lists, and I know I make my email address available, open. But only just to a certain point. There are only so many people that have this email address versus this email address. I have like 5 or something of them, and I try to, different businesses and things like that, and try to keep them otherwise separate. But they definitely get crossed up, and they get crossed up in places like this. There are people that have taken my email off of mass emails, people who listen to the network, people who they don't take the time that if you're going to carbon copy something to a bunch of people, that you put them in blind carbon copy so they can't see each other's email addresses. I'm talking to you know who you are. It's no big deal. I don't really care, but it's pretty obnoxious that someone does that. And so it has to stop at the point where you begin your communication. Here's a little communication tip for you. It has to stop at the point where you begin your communication. When you click reply to that email address, or you put those email addresses into those lines in the email program, That's what the BCC line is for, blind carbon copy. It's so that you can send it to a bunch of different people and they don't see each other's email addresses. They all still see that it came from you, but they don't see that that's a frontline type of communication thing, because it's netiquette. That's what it's called in this case when you're talking about digital emails, texts, things like that. It's the same as your phone. Your phone number. You don't, somebody calls up to work asking for somebody's personal phone number, you don't give that out at the office. Well, you have to look at these email exchanges in sort of the same way, that you're potentially exposing other people's information because you just want to share the latest story from QAnon, which, fine, whatever. You kill the conversation for someone like me and many other people when you force the conversation on them. You don't let them participate in the conversation on their own. So it works the same in all. This is, again, communication. It's not different based on the tools that you use. That's why it's not Facebook's fault. It's not social media's fault. It's not Twitter's fault. It's not Google's fault that you people can't communicate with each other. It's your fault that you can't communicate with each other. The tools that you use that make it easier for you to communicate don't make it easier for you to communicate better. It makes it easier for you to communicate as piss poorly as you have always done. And I encourage you to stop blaming the tools. It's not the tools' fault. The tools have all their own problems. They don't need your problems applied over the top of them, especially if you're looking to be truthful and honest with yourself and to help yourself change and to help yourself communicate better with people. And I'm not talking about spreading QAnon conspiracy. If that's what you want to do, fine. But I'm talking about communication across the board. I'm talking about all of the things that fall into it. And so begin your communication properly, and let me communicate with you and keep communicating with you by going to towardanarchy.com. And then on any page over on the right-hand side, there's a subscribe button. Subscribe yourself voluntarily to the newsletter, and I already made a quick decision that what I do is I send out the newsletter after this live episode, sometime following this live episode, so that there is something for you to listen to when you get the email. You're not getting the email and it says, oh, well, it's a week until this episode happens. You don't have to wait for it. You don't have to think about it. It's the current available replay archived episode of the show, and that's what I'll hit you with, and then maybe a mention of what's coming up on the next show, if I even know, because I don't even try to pretend. We talked about procrastination last week. I don't even try to pretend to know necessarily, and because the whole thing about me not being afraid to communicate with people, I'm not afraid to just come in here and turn on the microphone and say, hey, let's chat. Let's have a relatively lopsided one-way communication as it is in this case. Look for November 14th at towardanarchy.com as soon as you finish signing up for the email there, and there's links there. There's this fantastic meme. I noticed I haven't watched a whole lot, listened to a whole lot at all in a long time, almost a decade maybe. It's getting closer and closer to a decade now. To Alex Jones, but I've got a couple of episodes recently. He had David Icke on an episode, and I wanted to make sure I saw that. And then once you do it, once you get some Jones in your blood, you're Jones for it a little more, and you want some more. I'll come back and I'll tell you about how Alex Jones is sharing memes just like the meme I share. We'll be right back. TowardAnarchy.com to follow along as always, and please sign up for the the email list there. You can subscribe to it. It's available on any page on the website. It's over on the right hand side. It's right there, right above the little flashing thing that says "Get your copy of Cruising the Epiphany Highway," which is right above the flashing thing that says "Out now." The United Deep State of America, Shadow Government's Republic, and those are up there. I encourage you to check those out. Michael Howell and Dean Lloyd, Dr. Dean Lloyd, who of course will be back at the end of the month here to have another conversation with us about Cruising the Epiphany Highway. A couple of people that I've come to know a little bit, and I appreciate what they do, and I'm happy to share their work with you here on the show and on the website. And I have that space, and I have this little niche that I've carved out, that I've pinched out of all of this madness and all the voices that are crying out there, the myriad of ideas and things in this crazy time, all trying to communicate their message and idea out there. And, thank God, or whoever, if you will, for people like John and a place like Republic Broadcasting Network. And thank you, the listeners, because you've kept Republic Broadcasting Network on the air for as long as you have. It's been an amazing run, and it's only really just begun at this point. There's a whole new future ahead for the network, and with it, there's these changes, and I'm just becoming familiar with them myself. But hopefully you've been listening to the spots in the breaks there, and they're talking about how you can continue your donations and best practices. And I want to repeat that so that I know I'm just learning about it, just like everybody else is, in a sort of natural, organic way. This is what we can do, this is what we can't do, and this is the best thing. This is what's going to make things go a little smoother than, say, if we do things another way. And so I'm happy to be able to come here and do these things and talk about all of these different topics and try to be one of those reasoned voices through, but I couldn't do it without the network, and the network can't do it without you. And so we still can. We, again, are accepting automatic and recurring payments through PayPal. You can get to that through the Republic Broadcasting website. And if you had one of those recurring payments, if you canceled that over, whatever concerns, everybody knows it was changing. Things were going to be different, and for whatever reasons, you may have done so. That's a good thing, because you have to step back, take a look at what you have, your resources, what's going on, where this is how you proceed forward in life. So I hope you were practicing those things, and nobody blames you. But if you did have something like that going on, you can set those payments up again. You can restate them at this point. Everything is copacetic, and you can click the donate button at it's a big yellow button at republicbroadcasting.org. And then, of course, cash is always good. Cash is king. And you can send money orders. I don't know about sending cash unless you do so in a very particular way. You have to know your mail system. But there are other various forms of cash and things. Call the network if you have any question about your donation and where it should go. That's really the best thing to do. Just pick up the phone and give us a call at the network, and whoever picks up the phone will be able to point you in the right direction, set you up with best practices, things that you make sure your security is safe, whatever, make sure that your information isn't going someplace that it shouldn't, or all those things that we have to concern ourselves with when we expose ourselves and expose our wallets to anyone. You can call 800-724-2719, and it's extension 3. That'll get you there to the information that you need the fastest. That's any questions, anytime. You can call that number if you have questions for the network. But if you have any questions about your previous donation or future donations, if you want to set something up now, absolutely can help you with that. 800-724-2719. Use extension 3. And somebody there at the network will help you. And if you're with the digital people and you trust your PayPal and you don't have, I am that person. I use PayPal all the time. I've used it for years. I have a card that I can actually use in stores and things like that. Cash back my purchases. It's fantastic. I love PayPal. Just go to republicbroadcasting.org and click the yellow donate button, and we'll be right back on Toward Anarchy.
You are tuned in to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Visit our website by going to republicbroadcasting.org.
Republic Broadcasting Network has been an amazing beacon and voice for liberty for a long time, and that's not going to change. We're looking forward to bringing you continued amazing content and a variation of a difference in voices and ideas all across the network, looking to expand the reach. I'm just the Sunday afternoon guy and not involved much in my time that's been here, but I am excited about the way everybody's talking about things now and looking forward to just embracing a change. And the whole thing is, I don't know, scary is the right word, but it means something to me because this has been my home for my voice for quite a few years, not just in this iteration of the show, but years ago and before. And so it's a place that I'm happy to call home, and I'm happy to support, and I hope you will continue to support the network, even if you don't agree with me or maybe somebody else, because I know that happens all the time. We have such a wide range of topics and voices across the network. It's so many people producing shows for the network that not everybody agrees. Not every listener agrees with everything that everybody says, and not every listener likes or respects every individual across the network or the things that they have to say or what they might be contributing to the zeitgeist. And that's okay. That's exactly what it's here for, and that's part of the communication process, and it's part of what makes for successful communication. And it's something that's always at the back of my mind, how to try to communicate better, because I do really well in communicating with the people that I know about the topics that are important to me. But even then, if I'm honest and I look at the things that I do and the ways that I'm prone to reacting, I fail a lot of times. I miss you never know. But you miss an opportunity to properly present a message every time you fail to present your message. Whatever it is you're trying to communicate with someone, whether it's about the work situation or the kids or family, or just whatever aspect of it, whether it's a political idea or maybe it's something to do with history and learning, maybe you're pursuing an education. It applies across the board, and the same problems exist across the board when you fail to communicate and you fail to take some really, I consider them to be basic, but we take them for granted. This is what we do so much when we're so distracted. We have so many things that we have to deal with And then if you open up your mind to allow a flood of information in there, it's even worse. And you have to do that if you're trying to communicate with somebody. You certainly at least have to open up your mind in the situation, and you had better have had an open mind at some point leading up to the point that you're having the conversation, especially if your intent in the conversation is to persuade somebody to your point of view. You better have well thought out what it is that you think is important about it. And that's tough. That's tough for me to do. I'm the first to admit it, that it's hard in every aspect. There's so much discipline involved in the perfect attempt at communication. That's part of why I like writers and why I appreciate them, people who write books, like my good friend Michael Howell. Taking the time to make sure that it's right. It takes an investment, and it comes easier to some people. I think it probably is not necessarily easy to most people because we're just not practiced at it, and that's the big thing. And so I thought today it'd be great to just talk about some ideas that I think, these are things that I think personally through my experiences in various forms of communication and trying to boil them all down to the simplest, best, but without trying to contain everything. I discussed that last week, trying to reduce everything to a bunch of numbers or a series of algorithms, or like they've reduced us to as individuals for their data collection across the social media and across the internet in general. I try not to reduce it all to that, to where you can't think outside of it, but there are definitely some best practices that I've come up with that you can approach any conversation with, and they become more complicated, harder to do, depending on who the conversation is with and what the terms of the conversation are. Is it an adversarial conversation? Is it an educational conversation? Are you the learned person? Are you the person in ignorance, or presumed ignorance, if you will? So many different variations on who on how you're going to communicate, depending on who and what the situation is. But these other things will, or the tools that you use, as I was saying earlier, but these things make no difference when you practice the core important things. And one of those, maybe the biggest one, has to be respect for the conversation and the process, showing an appreciation. This is one that I jotted down, and I didn't put these in any particular order in my thought process, but to really to show appreciation for the process and the give and take of a conversation. If the conversation isn't valuable to you and it's just going to be noise, you're going to tune it out. That's what you do to noise. You tune it out, or you get away from it, as far away from it as you can, until you get the level of quiet that you appreciate. And the same as in communicating in this sense. If you don't value the conversation, there's no reason why you're going to participate in the conversation fairly. And that's a lot of the conversations that you will have in a place like a Facebook, across the social media. You don't value those conversations, and so you use bad practices when you have them. You fall into a lot of those very well-known traps. Of course, using fallacy, various forms of fallacy, and there are certain ones that we're all prone to using to varying degrees, and things like hasty generalizations, and that's going to be the most obvious one when it comes to lacking any appreciation or respect for the conversation that you're having. So that has to be sort of, if I were to try and take these thoughts and reorganize them or put them in some sort of real order, I think that has to probably be the top of it, is that you have to show respect and appreciation for the conversation and the process of the conversation. Otherwise, why have it? What's the point if you don't respect the person or the ideas that you're having the conversation about? If it's going to be an argument as in you're just hollering at each other, and not an argument as in to understand and resolve and learn, then why have that conversation? Let it go. Scroll past it. Keep your mouth shut. Whatever it takes, but show some respect for the even if it's the individual that you don't respect. There's a process that needs a respect, because when followed properly, that person that you don't respect, you could come to respect them if you listen to them and they listen to you and you respect the process. So I would think that has to be way up there on the list of it. Another one that's really high on the list, and it was actually the first one that I wrote down when I was freeform, just throwing it down here, just notes, writing in different directions and circling and drawing things, and just this freeform process of writing. Listen more and speak less, which is funny coming from a guy who's sitting here speaking and trying to fill 2 hours of time with mostly his own voice. But even then, even when I'm speaking, I'm listening to my own words and I'm thinking about them and what the value of them is, and do I need to expound on that idea anymore? Do I need to tangent? Do I need to go down that road, as it were? So I'm even listening to myself as I speak. I'm listening so much that I'm. Yeah, but that was a good thought. That was a good. Oh, yeah, make that point. Definitely have to do that. Yeah, I'm listening to myself more than I'm speaking, and that's a really good one, I think, to take into consideration when you are having interpersonal communication, individual communication, or intimate communication. I think any of us that have the successful intimate relationships will already recognize that you let your significant other talk. You let them talk, even to the point to where they stop talking and you're not sure if you should talk, and that there's an awkward silence that somebody has to eventually fill. Let them talk. Don't interrupt. Don't try to assume what they're saying. These are all things that we do, especially with people that we're intimate with, because we have already heard their stories. We already know what they're going to say about such and such person at work, and this person's trying to destroy that person, and I can't, we all understand those social conversations, and we all always know where they will lead and what somebody will have to say to them about it. But that's not the point. The point is that this person is needing to say it. They need to say it. They need to get it out. And if you're that person that has to listen to them, listen, let them get it out. And along with that, agree with them. This was literally the next thing I put down, and it makes sense to give positive response and reaction to the person that you're conversing with or the conversation that you're having. Try to keep it away from the negatives. Focus on the positives to keep the conversation going in a constructive direction. If you want to focus on the negatives, the first thing that's going to happen is that the individual is going to get defensive. And that's if you're lucky. They might outright lash out at you in retaliation for how dare you consider, how dare you focus on this when I'm clearly trying to get you to see the positive side of it and re-encourage the positive things. I'm already dealing with the negative aspect of it. That's why I need to have a conversation with somebody. I have to talk it out with somebody. Everybody should be their own first therapist, but you can't be yours or somebody else's if you're not truthful and honest and doing these things that make it possible for you to actually hear what the other person is saying. We're already prone to apply our own understanding of things. The language, that's another one that's on my list, is agreeing on the language, because if you're speaking a different language than the person, then that the value of that conversation is going to be harder to achieve. It may not be there at all. You may just completely disrespect the language that the person is using, and that can happen culturally. That can happen economically. You can speak above somebody, end up speaking down to them without knowing it. People can certainly feel that they're being spoken down to. So if you're minimizing how much you're speaking and you're doing more listening, that's not going to happen. But you still have to agree to the language that's used, whether you have to have a back and forth on what the language is going to be acceptable, which unfortunately leads to a distraction from the conversation. But this is a barrier to any greater conversation, to any greater communication about more complicated ideas, is that if they don't understand, you don't understand each other's language. And I don't just mean a Mexican speaking to an American. I'm talking about those cultural, those political, those social differences that are perceived and that are realized in education, and they're realized in the ability to speak, which is, these things are pretty core to having successful communication. And so if you're speaking to someone that isn't as well educated, which you can probably assume if you're educated at all, that most people aren't as educated as you, because most people aren't. Respect the language that they're using and speak to them in their language. It's really part of basic communication, and that's the whole point of my conversation today. And there are many more things to talk about. Follow along at towardanarchy.com. I'll come back and I'll tell you about some things that are there that are really interesting. Boy, I'm glad it's a 2-hour show, because I have just a ton of stuff to talk about, and I forgot I had mentioned earlier the thing about Alex Jones, and having watched some Alex Jones here recently, and I noticed that he's making it a point to share a meme. I don't know if he's doing it every time. I don't pay that close of attention. It's just sort of running like the Dallas game is right now behind me while I'm doing other stuff, and I may or may not be actually paying attention to what was going on. But I did notice that on more than one occasion, he's had a point where he makes it a point to share a meme or an image, something descriptive along the lines of what you might share on some social media or something like that, which is it's great. I think that it's awesome that he's doing that, because I've been doing it for years. It's been a thing that I did on this network years ago on the previous iteration of whatever this thing is, whatever this conversation is that we have every week, that it just keeps drawing me back. And by the way, you need a lot of water. That's the key to rice. You need a lot of water. If you'd have to be, you're not included in the joke, you wouldn't know. It's just across the social media, everybody's sharing like I need you to do, the like, the share, the follows, the subscribe, and when they do, even taking the time to mention something personal about how they feel about the show. And I think that's fantastic. I think that's really a great thing to be able to get people interested enough to share. It's not easy to do. Even though it's so simple to just click a couple of buttons and reshare that thing, we all have our reasons why we do or don't, and they flash past our brain, in the seconds before we keep scrolling, or before we press that like or that share button, and an excuse and a reason and whatever it is. And to stop, take that extra couple of seconds. I've talked about this many times, especially with when I noticed on YouTube that there's just so many more plays than there are likes on that, and it seems like just such a simple thing to do, and it's the biggest names, the biggest artists, and I'm sitting there and I click on their song and I see that, and it's millions of plays and 100,000 likes. It just seems like a weird thing to me, and so I know that people just aren't in the habit of doing it, just like they're not in the habit of practicing good communication. So you have to get yourself in the habit. We need to create habits. We're habitual beings. There's no question about that. It's obvious that our brains like to know what we're doing, from not necessarily from 1 second to the next, but we like to have direction. We like to have goals, and we achieve them. We're more successful when we actually set them. We're much more likely to achieve them. I'm glad there's so much more time, because there's so much more to tell you. We got to go into a break, let you know where we are, and we'll come right back in, dive right back into this thing here on Toward Anarchy. Stick around. All right, and here we go. We're off into hour number 2. It's, as always, just so wonderful to come here and do this and talk about these things. And if you want to follow along, go to towardanarchy.com. Look for November 14th. And you see, I'm talking about communications. I'm talking about how hard it is to communicate complicated ideas, and how if you just take some basic steps to reform how you participate in a conversation and how you view a conversation before you ever even start the conversation, regardless of what tools you use or where the conversation is taking place, or who it's taking place with, or how many people are listening. These things are universal, I believe. Again, this is not something that I've been taught per se. This is something that I've learned. All of these different ideas compiled through years and years of being the person who will turn on the microphone, will get up on the stage in front of the people, even when I'm not certain what it is I'm supposed to be doing or why I'm supposed to be there. I will still go ahead and do that, because one, I think I'm a good storyteller. I have this ability to tell if I'm really getting into one of these things where I'm describing something that has happened to me. I imagine that's probably one of the big appeals. It has to be, because it was my big appeal personally for radio, was just the listening to somebody and being able to visualize so clearly what it was they were talking about because of the way they describe it. And so having that ability to do that, and I just wanting to always have some fun as well. Self-deprecation is always a positive in people who present themselves publicly, because it makes them human. It makes the listener, the viewer, realize that they're just another person just like you. They just happen to have chosen some different ways of communicating with people, and things that they've found to be successful, and that's why they would be successful, and that's why they would be the person standing up on that stage or turning on that microphone, and why you would sit there and listen to them in the first place, while you might even think there's a reason, well, maybe I should turn this on and hear what this person is saying. So a whole bunch of things that go into the idea of trying to communicate with people. But I also shared, as always, at towardanarchy.com, some links for you, and I want to talk about those as well, because I hate it when I do that. I provide these things for you, and then I'm off on my conversation or my topic, and I don't do it, because I put some work into it, and I've been doing it for years, and it's a successful, simple model. I control my own a platform of information in terms of the web like that. And so it's really easy for me to take a whole bunch of ideas and condense them down into this little itty-bitty space, this little page on the size of your phone, if that's what you're looking at it through. And it should look pretty good on your phone. I make an effort to make sure that the mobile people can see it as well as anybody else, and interact with it and get the same functions out of it, like clicking on the subscribe button over there on the right-hand side of any page, not just November 14th, and signing up for the email list, so that way we have one more way to stay in communication. And I promise to practice good practices. I am using a third-party tool, so I can't speak for them, but they seem to be. It's MailChimp. I suppose they're no more guilty of the information surveillance capitalism. This is one of the stories that I shared with you. Than any of these other groups. They have a thing, and you agree to it or you don't, and you take your chances if you read it or you don't. But they seemed. I looked around. I looked at some various tools. I tried one for a while, and it just wasn't what I wanted. And they seemed to be as trustworthy as anybody in relationship to trying to offer a reasonable service, as exactly what it claims to be, without a bunch of chicanery like seems to go on with Facebook and some of these others. But that exactly what I'm saying there. It's a known thing, and it was kind of funny for the New York Times. There's this Dr. Shoshana Zuboff that wrote this book here about surveillance capitalism, what they call it, and they say that we are the object of a secret extraction operation, but it's not secret, and so it's really kind of funny. It's almost prognostication of events that, if anybody was paying attention, you would know that that's what's going on, and you could probably predict, or as likely as anyone. I was having a conversation again with somebody about Q and my impression of what it was, and there's reason to believe that it was all really just a hoax. And anyway, if you've looked at any of the information documentaries and things about the people surrounding it, you already know that it was just another person. It wasn't some insider with amazing access or anything like that. There was people that tried to make you believe that, but that wasn't even Q. If you know the history of where these quatrains, if you will, come from, these Q trains. I don't know what they call them, and sorry, I've not been a follower. And if you are, I get it. I understand the fun in predicting the news, but that's just what it is. And again, I was having that conversation, and my statement to these people with the Q thing is as it always has been, and it's funny because I kind of do it a little bit myself. But I have a long form to explain and to poke fun at and to make it clear what I really mean about the things that I talk about. It's not something that Q falls into the same paradigm in communication that's the overriding conversation of the show today, is just this idea that it's cryptic, it's short. I think I even wrote down the word cryptic at one point in language and in terms of trying to pass one of these these messages. You need to be, you need to obviously to practice, but you need to practice that short delivery without it becoming a soundbite or a headline. Something I've talked about on the show, not wanting to turn the word anarchy into a soundbite, even though I have this little saying about we live in anarchy every day with uncountable interactions between ourselves in the world around us, where we don't consider the opinion or the dictates of authority at all, so much so that authority doesn't exist. Statistically, there's no such thing as authority in a statistical sense. But I don't want to keep repeating that and have it become a soundbite. I'm lucky I have the space to be able to expound on it, but the Q doesn't. Q has that short space, that short form, could use the longer form and occasionally does, but still purposely chooses to speak in a sort of cryptic way. You're supposed to guess what he's talking about. And of course, there's a reason for that, because what he's done is he's cold. I've said this before. What I think is, this is John Edwards. This is any huckster psychic since Nostradamus, that they just cold read the headlines and trends and people around them. And anyone who's paying attention can do this. There are things, topics, ideas that everyone already would know about if they were paying attention, and then comment vaguely enough on them that it leaves room for your misunderstanding. Well, you didn't interpret it right, or error. Well, it was the different Nostradamus, good example. People want to say something about his quatrain on the Hister, which is a river, but then they want to say that that's actually a misspelling and that he actually meant Hitler. And this is the kind of thing that you have to deal with when you have Q at the center of your conversation, or in any conversation, any communication where the aim is to either convince you of something that you're probably not going to be convinced of, or to play a game with you, to be a part of something, especially in the case of a Q where it's caught on, where the individuals behind it draw attention. It becomes a big thing, so it's really easy to get into, and it's easy to fake it when you're trying to make it, I guess, or when you've already made it. Really, it's much easier when you've already made it to fake it. You can get by on your past successes a little bit, but it only goes just so far. That's why the Q thing is sort of run its course, while there may still be references to it. And I know that there's still sort of 30%, about a third or something like that, of quote Republicans who believe that Donald Trump is still going to be reinstated as president. Not that he's going to be reelected, which stands to be a pretty good possibility if he gets selected to the ticket. Yes, I said selected. We don't choose him. Somebody else does. If he's chosen again for the Republican ticket, it seems like if they had a vote today that he or his Republicans, whoever he will end up probably anointing if he doesn't compete himself, whoever they choose. I guess it's political, it's silliness, it's a little bit of wishful thinking, it's a little bit of polling, it's a little bit of playing with numbers. It's all of these things that lead to confusion in the conversation, and so many voices on the conversation, and so many different conversations to be had. Which one do you pay attention to? It's all part of complicated ideas and how we communicate them to one another. But we try to have a little bit of fun. So this whole thing about Google and Facebook, and them sort of extracting your information and practicing this surveillance capitalism. That link is up there for you to read. Sorry if you've read your allotment of New York Times pieces for this month. Save the link and read it another time. I think it's 8 or something like that you can look at before you hit the paywall. But then they give you can sign up for free. You just give them your email address, and then you can read quite a few more. I've done that. But even then, you eventually run out. They want your money. And there's other links there as well that I shared. Some homework for you, economic homework, why in a free economy prices are supposed to go down and not up. This is just a simple breakdown of the basics, basic economic understanding in supply and demand and availability of product to produce other products, and how technology plays into that, and how the technology is oftentimes a big investment up front, but then on the back end it produces greater results, and you're able to get more for your dollar out of it, and that's why prices go down. That's why a TV, even with our ridiculously manipulated dollars, why a TV, an HD TV in sort of 1997 cost $10,000, and today I have 5 of them in my house or something like that, some ridiculous number of larger 40-inch screens that produce HD picture, whether they're on a computer or whether they're an actual television, if you will. I don't know. I'm always plugged in. Things are always on. It's the amount of attention you pay to it, and how much you invest in the things that you see on it that's important, not the fact that you have it. I always kind of just laugh a little bit under my breath at the people who are smug about the fact that they don't own a TV. And so you don't know what other people are thinking. In a world full of other people, you don't know what they're being told to think, if not thinking it themselves. You don't have any sort of window into pop culture. You don't have any, not even a little Overton window, one that you can, you or they can move around and position where you want it. Oh, that picture is so much prettier than the picture over here. I'm gonna leave it on this picture over here. You won't even do that for yourself. I think obviously some people it's a legitimate thing, and they just don't have a TV, and they're just not interested, and they're just not interested probably in a whole lot of things in the world. But the guy that gets on there and starts talking about politics and starts talking about how bad pop culture is, and then follows it up by saying that he doesn't own a TV is completely full of crap. He either owns a TV and knows exactly why he's saying the things he's saying, or he's saying the things that he's saying without having any insight into what those things actually are, a personal insight. You get your opinions from, you can not have a TV and still get the stupid ass opinions that you find across the television without watching the television. Sorry guys, I hate to burst your bubble. And so in entertainment terms, another link that's up there, another article that I shared is this guy writing about, thinks it's time to kill off the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and even as a bad fan, I think that's just, it's sour grapes. It's people who don't accept art for the individual art that it is, and they're always expecting something more from the creators, something more from the artist than what the artist is willing to give, instead of accepting and celebrating what they do. They always want to analyze the individual, break them down, try to destroy their message. It was the Marvel Cinematic Universe, a perfect example of that right now, in the trashing of the Eternals movie. And I'm you've heard me say they're a C character, but I don't go into the movie trashing the actors and their performances and things like that before I've ever seen it. It can't possibly. They did the same thing with Ben Affleck when it was announced that he would be a Batman. Oh, it's impossible. He can't be a good Batman. It's just. It's dishonest conversation, which is another part of my communications conversation, which we'll get back into here. It's all part of this same conversation, but I need to make sure that you go to towardanarchy.com, you like, share, you follow, subscribe, you share the meme that I shared this week. It's the Chinese symbol for voting. You'll love it. You have to see it yourself. I believe that guy's getting what he voted for, and he's getting it really good. Towardanarchy.com is where you'll find that. And then I want to talk a little bit about vaccines, because there's a couple of things that I just want you to pay attention to as it's coming up, to really watch it, watch the numbers, watch the rhetoric, what they're saying, and I need you to know the digital IDs are coming. All these things on my mind. Talk about. It's one of the greatest things that I find about PayPal is that you can create a commitment to a monthly commitment to something like the network. This just came to mind, thinking about wanting to just reiterate that you can still use the PayPal to support the network. One of the great things that I love about PayPal is that you can create an agreement like that, and that you can just log right into your PayPal account, pull up your PayPal app on your phone, and they even have a separate one for professional if you want to use your business, if you want to use PayPal for your business. But you just log right in, and you end the contract. That's it. You don't have to call the company on the phone and say, hey, I need you to stop taking a payment from my credit card every month. I don't agree to this anymore. I don't want your stupid magazines anymore. Whatever it is, if you create an electronic agreement, monthly, annually, whatever agreement with the company, and you use PayPal to pay for it, you can just log into PayPal and you can end that agreement. And conversely, you can log back into PayPal and recreate that agreement. If for some reason, with everything, the changes that were coming up, and we were the first ones to tell you, go out there, just be careful with your donation at the moment. Not because we were concerned about it, we just didn't want them to get lost anywhere in any transition and paperwork, legal things like that, messing around with the things that happen after somebody dies when they're in charge of a business or finances, all these things that can come up. We get it. We're having to deal with it. I'm sure most people probably deal with it at some point in their life, if they're close to anybody in their family at all, having to deal with these sort of things. But everything is working out. Everything is getting back to normal, if you will, and everybody at the network is looking towards moving to the future. And so it's fine to use PayPal as you did before, or you can go to republicbroadcasting.org and you can click on the yellow PayPal donate button and set up a new agreement that gets your donation into the network to keep all these amazing voices, including my own, even just a little niche, just a little piece that I've been able to carve out in my corner here on the network and the rest of the world. We can't do it without you. You've been the reason we've been able to do this as successfully and make it as big and as long-lasting as it has, and you will continue to be a force as we move forward on the network, and things do as they do, change. Nothing to be afraid of. Embrace it. Take the ride with us. It's going to be a fantastic one, I think. I think we're all looking at the future, and we're looking at different technologies and different means of broadcasting and getting the message out there, and involvement in different social media and creating platforms like TLB Talk, and it's been involving the network in anything, in any way that we can to grow it and to continue to bring amazing voices. If you're at all concerned or confused about any of the donation possibilities or where you stand with yours, give the network a call. It's 1-800-724-2719. Hit extension 3, and that's the quickest way to just have any of those questions answered about anything that we can possibly answer, that there's an answer to concerning the network. And so we can't help you with a myriad of other things that you may need help with, but we can certainly help you with understanding anything that we're trying to do or that has happened here recently as we move forward after the death of John and the changes that naturally occur when something like that happens. So proud to be a part of it all. Looking forward to hopefully getting involved more and more in where things are going, and to be like you and actually help in making decisions for the network in terms of you voting with your dollar, voting for the voices that you want to hear and what you believe is the truth, and then all you have to do is just help us share that. That's the next biggest thing, keeping the network up and running, keeping the dollars flowing in right there at the top of the list. And then right after that is that take that extra second, those moments that it takes to click the like button, to click the share button for all of the different producers of quality content across the network, for republicbroadcasting.org itself, on the social media. If you see us share a link there, or some of these ideas, even if it's just the meme, if it's not us talking about the show or the network or something, if we're just sharing a meme, share that, because somebody sees that meme and that idea contained within that meme, and they think, oh, well, those people hold views similar to my own. Maybe I'll click that button and I'll click that follow button, and we'll pick up, that followers all of a sudden are so much more important across the social media. If you're not a participant in it, and a big participant in it, you don't understand how big it's become after recent changes they've made. It's not about how many people you're connected to anymore. It's about how many people are actually following what you say. And concentrating on that, of course, because they can monetize that. We will come back and get back to this conversation about communications. We'll be right back.
You are tuned in to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Visit our website by going to republicbroadcasting.org.
Okay, so it's again just so many things to talk about, and all I can do is just try to give you a few of the thoughts that just go screaming through my head at any given time on any given topic. I try to find something that I think is important, and I'll have any number of conversations across social media or in real life throughout the week that I will think, okay, yeah, I need to remember that idea or that thought and try to express that or expound on that the next time I turn on the microphone. And so when I come here and I turn on the microphone and I start talking about communication, it's because I see a need out there to reiterate how we achieve positive communication between each other, because I see it just failing, and when it fails, when you fail to communicate with somebody on any idea, they're going to be less likely to listen to you the next time, and less likely to listen to you the next time, unless you're in this weird position in authority government where the people don't change. I mean, the people change, but the things that they're doing don't, and the reasons that they end up lying to you, and the reason you end up voting for the other guy don't change with the guy. That guy goes away, the problems still exist, because the problems are inherent in this failed notion of magically conducting a ceremony and giving powers that we don't have as individuals over to a collective that is disinterested, but that is managed by very interested individuals because they profit from it. And so we run into this huge problem that begins in many ways in just the simple failures of our communications. The way that we talk to people and the ideas and things that we talk to them about. And so I've been on about this thing in an effort to get you to believe me, to convince you. I've made a claim, and that's that people don't communicate properly, and I support it with a myriad of pieces of evidence across the board, from millions and millions and millions of posts on social media to arguments across TV and news channels, and arguments in bedrooms and living rooms and front offices across America. That's my support for my claim, and the warrant is something along the lines of because we don't communicate well, as I've shown that we don't, that the system is able to take advantage of us. So that's the argumentation process that I just described to you. That's the claim, the support, and the warrant. The reason why I suggested that these things, that this claim is true, that it's true because we need to focus on this aspect of it. We need to change this thing. That's how you have. That's how you frame an argument when you're trying to convince somebody, whether it's over any of their emotional appeals, their values, the things that they value, and you do so by using proper logic and language and reason and rhetoric. There's a trivium of conversation, of argumentation, that you can look at them different ways. But as opposed to sort of doing that textbook thing to you, this is how you make a textbook argument. This is how you have a textbook conversation and reach an understanding. Well, those, that's fine. Those are great things to build on. But where do you go from there? What do those things really mean? If you can boil down argumentation and conversation and the ability to understand, to making a claim and supporting that claim for whatever warrant you wish, then it seems like it would be kind of simple, but it's not, because those are just a framework. Inside the rest of the conversation, there are so many other things involved in that, and that's why if you ask somebody to give you a lecture or a book on conversation argumentation, they would have to spend a chapter on what is a claim. Maybe more than a chapter, but spend more than a chapter on what is support. But because those deal with the particulars of avoiding things like falling into fallacy, of how you deal with things that have fallen into fallacy, the various emotional appeals and claims of value and faulty use of authority. That's what often happens. Times a lot of people say, that they're somebody's making an appeal to authority, but actually a lot of times, particularly in political and social conversations, they're actually making a faulty use of authority, and a faulty use of authority is when you dismiss the authority of someone else in favor of your authority. So you're not appealing to authority. You're just saying that your authority is more important than another authority, and they are two different things, because an appeal to a authority is sort of the argument that, well, I don't have any argument, but these guys do. These guys that are authorities on the topic, that's an appeal to an authority. Whereas a false use of authority is saying, well, that doesn't matter that you have other information that comes from an authority. This is the authority that stands to reason, whether or not the individual knows anything about the topic that they're having, the conversation that they're having at all. And of course, this comes up with the conversation about COVID and about vaccines and the problems that we're having right now. We have people who aren't honest in their conversation. It's something that I mentioned, but I try to talk about it all the time. I try to get you to be honest in your conversations, honest with yourself about why you're having conversations, and honest with yourself about the information that you use to support your claims in your conversations. Just being honest in your approach and showing respect, showing appreciation for the process, the give and take of a conversation. This is not a conversation that you and I are having. It's a guide, a lecture, or whatever. It's not a conversation. It's not two-way. I don't have to consider so much what the individual I'm talking to is considering as I'm speaking. But I do still have to take into that consideration that larger picture of is the message clear? Whether this individual or that individual agrees or doesn't agree, that's not the point. Is it still going? Is the language still following? Can they understand what it is that we're trying to say? Are we speaking above them, or are we speaking to them on a level that they should understand? Are we being honest about that? Are they being honest in return in their understanding? Gene Simmons and a bunch of other rock and roll stars have come out against the anti-vax crowd, the anti-vaccine crowd. Gene Simmons, Howard Stern are a couple that I know. So there's, I guess, particular reasons. They're big curly-haired Jews that have a lot of say in showbiz, I guess. I hate to put it that way, but it is literally what they are. And they've chosen to use their voice to support authoritarian dictates on individuals' bodies, and that's not very rock and roll of these two anti-establishment, barrier-breaking rock and roll performers, if you will. Howard Stern's not a rock performer, but he's something of a rock star in the same sort of vein. And at the core of that is that I believe that they're dishonest, and I believe that they're doing a disservice to their listeners, the people that listen to them speak. Not that I imagine so many listen to Gene Simmons these days, but Howard Stern certainly has a large audience, and he does them a disservice by pretending that he knows anything about vaccination, that what he understands about it is nothing more than what he's been told, that he's probably, I would be willing to bet this, in both of their cases, Gene Simmons and Howard Stern, that neither of them has spent a minute understanding vaccines other than just reading what they've been told about vaccines, and that even in that they're not going and looking at the counter information, that they're using they're placing a false use of authority. They're appealing to authority, of course, but they're using a false authority because they are dismissing offhand other authorities on the same subject in favor of their own, and it's dishonest. You have to be honest in your communication if you want people to believe you. And you have to, I have to double back just a little bit on this, because I never made this clear in one of the points that I was making earlier. And I just didn't need that dough enough, I guess, is what I'm thinking. You need to say yes and you're right more often in your conversations. Be reaffirming and reassuring, especially in these intimate conversations that you have. The larger ones, it helps. It helps to address people with, I think you're probably right about that. I think, yes, that's probably true. I think, oh, yes, that's a valid point. I see where you're coming from. These positive, reaffirming concepts and quips that you drop in there, and head nods, and they reaffirm that you're listening to the person, that you're hearing what they're saying, and that you're placing a value on what they're saying, but you're not being overly judgmental or trying to alter what they're saying about it. You may come back to that at some point, but you will do so in turn. You will say, okay, those were valid points, and those were all good. And there was something you said earlier, and I'd like to come back to that, and I'd like to say, well, this is what I've found out. Yes, you're absolutely correct. People see things in this way, but here's what this piece of evidence and what these numbers and what my personal experience is. And so I ask you in turn to consider, you don't have to say that out loud, but that by you being gracious and saying yes and confirming that people are more right more often in your conversations, they will do the same to you, that they will look for the positives in your conversation, and they will say yes to you, and they will be honest in the conversations. And there's so many more little aspects that we can hit on. Obviously, you have to give evidence-based criticisms. If you're going to come back and say, yes, but you're right, but this is this. Evidence-based when it's a criticism. Otherwise, you need to be real clear, very, very clear. I try to do it myself when I'm talking about opinion. For instance, right now, I'm not talking about opinion. I'm talking about fact. I'm talking about something that I, as a human being, have been studying for nearly 50 years, learning how to communicate with other human beings. I just have had the luxury of being able to spend some time analyzing the successes and failures of my communications and continuing to work on them and improve them. And so that's the difference between you and me. Yes, we've both had a whole bunch of conversations. I've spent a whole bunch of time analyzing the conversations that I have for the places that I'm failing in those conversations. It's obvious, it's glaring to me, the failings of other people's conversations. And I can sit there and I can poke and prod and tell them where this is wrong and that's wrong. And I can do that all day long, but it doesn't really seem to make a big change, especially when one thing that we have to consider when we're talking about practicing communication and trying to improve our communication is considering the tools that we're using now and the environment in which they're being used by the listener on the other end, and understand that you need to practice short, sweet deliveries. In radio, in rock radio, they called it kiss. You would kiss it. You'd keep it simple, short. Keep it short, stupid. Different variations of KISS talking about Gene Simmons, Knights in Satan's Service, or Knights in silly. No, that's an S. It would costume. That's not going to work. But it was just this. It's a really simple idea of keeping your message short and tailored because you only have just so much time. Especially in radio, you're looking at 30 seconds or a minute of talk time. The rest of the time, they want music playing or they want commercials playing. They don't want the DJ prattling on about whatever he was doing last night that he probably shouldn't have been doing. If they do, they give them a talk show to do that. The rest of the time, they want the commercials playing, they want the music playing, and so the delivery has to be short and sweet. In our digital age, the area that we exist in now, that's true across the board. People's attention span is as short as it's ever been, and the methods of communication contribute to easy dismissal of the information because it's not delivered in any sort of personal manner. So you skip and ignore texts and tags and posts and things like that. So already you're not listening. They're not listening to you, as the case may be. But to capture their attention and to leave an impact, you have to find that comfort zone between keeping it simple, stupid, short, sweet, and still getting a message across. So I'll come back and I'll wrap up a couple more tips and we'll wrap up the show. I can't believe it's over again. I miss you guys. It'll be a whole nother week. We'll be right back. Well, as always, it has to come to an end, but at least it ends. I put in many hours standing in front of the microphone in a row at times, but it's always nice to be done too, and to just get back to life and well, the drum set. That's where I'm headed as soon as the microphone goes off here. Just let me recap for you, because again, I didn't put any of these things in any sort of order, so I try to maybe put them in a little bit of an order just to wrap the thing up and just cap off this conversation for now on communicating, because we'll have to have it again. We'll have to keep having it because we all have to keep practicing these things, and that's the point. And you have to keep practicing them because language changes and people changes and political ideas changes and social changes, and so you have to continue to keep improving your conversations with the basics, and you have to show respect and appreciate the not just the individual on the other side of the conversation, but the conversation itself. Don't have useless conversations because they're just going to lead to unproductive fighting or limited conversations that really just don't get you anywhere. But you have to respect the process itself. That's definitely part of it. You have to listen more and speak less. At some point in there, you have to agree on the language and you may have to talk to someone first before you can agree on the language, because you don't know. You haven't spoken to them before, or you have to set your language in advance of it because you don't know what your audience is going to be, or your audience varies. So it's not the first thing, but it's up there high on the list of things that you need to do right away. And if you realize that you're not speaking the same language, maybe you shouldn't be having the conversation. You have to circle back to number one. Can you show respect for the topic, for the conversation, for the process, for the other individual on the other side of it? You have to be honest and avoid using outright lies. The fallacy is one thing that comes with practice. You have to practice not responding oftentimes hastily, which leads to your hasty generalizations, but also that hastiness, that not listening, it leads to the rest of the failures in the conversation process as well. That's the long and short of it, and keep practicing. And I hope you enjoyed thinking about the idea, and we'll come back again next week and we'll have a conversation for you with someone special. Until then, you take care.